And speaking of empowerment and maybe elevation, it's time to introduce our last speaker. Last but not least, we quote her as an adventure goddess who has her own day in Seattle called the Renata Chlumska Day. And her motto in life is, if you're safe, it's worthwhile taking a risk. And when it comes to what she does, safety is definitely a risk to how we interpreted it.
And taking risks is also a big part of business, so we think we have a lot to learn from Renata. So give a warm welcome to our goddess of the day, Renata Chlumska! Woo!
Wow, what an introduction. Thank you so much. So, yeah, I'm Renata. I'm born and raised in the southern parts of Sweden, in Malmö, in Skåne, but I live for the last 20 years or so. I've been having my base camp in Jönköping. And I'm not in the tech business, as obviously. I'm a professional adventure athlete and doing extreme expeditions, undertaking challenging projects, and making the impossible possible has been my livelihood for almost 2 decades now. And of course, I've managed to complete quite a few projects over those years. But still, our businesses are different, but I'm still working in a field and in an arena that's mostly male-dominated. So I think you will kind of feel a resemblance to some of the things I will be sharing with you today. And one of them that you might feel the same as I often get the question, why? I mean, why do I do what I do? Why did I decide this kind of profession, and why did I want to climb Mount Everest? And I'm pretty sure that some of you get those questions, probably just because you are women in a male-oriented, male-dominated business. For me, I think one of the reasons why I too get that question is not just because I'm a woman. I don't think I would have been given that question as often if I had been raised somewhere, you know, in France, in Italy, northern Italy, in Austria, in Switzerland, having those fantastic Alps around the corner, or at least if I would have been raised somewhere in the northern parts of Sweden. But I'm from Skåne. I mean, Skåne is great, but it's completely flat. You know, it's not like you wake up in the morning, Möllevången, where I grew up, open your window, look out over the square, and think to yourself, wow, look at the mountains. I'm going to become a mountain climber. No, I mean, that's not where the inspiration came from. The mountains are not there. But that's what inspired, that the mountains were not there. Because that made it feel like something new, fascinating, something different, something strange in a way, something unique, something new, and also as many things that are new, a bit intimidating, a bit scary, and very challenging. And if there's something that I've always felt an attraction to, is putting myself in situations that I'm not sure if I can handle, if I can manage. Because that's when I believe that you grow. That's when you develop. That's when you evolve and learn new things. And when you take those steps out into the unknown, you get so many different perspectives over the world, out in the world, but also different perspective into yourself. It's a journey on so many different levels to dare to challenge yourself. And I'm not talking mainly about physical challenge, but mental challenges, to dare to communicate in new ways and meet people in different ways, and to challenge yourself very much mentally. And challenge other people as well, mentally. And then, of course, I always loved the physical part. I mean, I am a very active person. That was what I did best in school, and I've always enjoyed it. The outdoors, that's where I have my heart and my passion. So I've always done a lot of sports, been very active. But still, it took me quite a few years before I accidentally stumbled across climbing. Well, of course, it took a few years. I live in Skåne, so it's like, took a while to find the mountains. But eventually I did, and I fell in love with the mountains, or with the hills, small, Kullaberg. But it was good for a beginner like me, and I fell in love with the sports because it had that combination, all those ingredients that I love. I mean, the mental challenge, the physical challenge, the camaraderie. You have to trust the people that you climb with. I mean, they really hold the other end of your lifeline. So I was fascinated by that and decided that this is what I'm going to do. This is what I want to, become really good at. So I fell in love with the sports of climbing. But also, it probably determined what I really thought climbing was so fantastic was that I fell in love with my climbing instructor. So yeah, that happens. And of course, he fell in love with me. And my climbing instructor was no less than Göran Kropp. And this was the summer of '95, so it's just a few months before he was going to embark on his fantastic expedition where he was going to bicycle from Sweden to Nepal, summit Mount Everest, and then bicycle back again, to short it up, sum it up a bit shortly. Really shortly. But I think most of you have heard about this expedition. And I was so fascinated by this project, and I felt instantly that I have to become a part of it, realizing, of course, that I can't join him on the entire trip. I mean, that was pretty obvious. I'm not naive. I realized that I can't join him up on Mount Everest. Of course not. I just started to climb on Kullaberg. So there's kind of it's a bit, altitude difference, 8,848 meters, Mount Everest, Kullaberg 30. So it's kind of a gap in experience. So I realized I can't go there. But fortunately for me, his expedition contained of two parts. He wasn't only going to climb, he was going to bicycle as well. And I figured to myself, now how difficult can that be? Right? To bicycle down to Nepal. I mean, when you look at it, I knew how to ride a bike. I had been training for that for many years. And actually, I had a lot more experience riding a bike than Göran did because I had been competing in bicycling. So I figured, here you have a resource if you take me along. Of course, it's a bit longer distance than my regular training sessions, but I like to train, so you can't always focus on the difficult things and the negative and hard stuff. You have to break it down and thinking, okay, I enjoy like to go working out, so this is just like a working session after another, after another, after another, after another, for 6 months. I'm going to be in so good shape. It's going to be fantastic. And then I started thinking even more about the trip and all the things I'm going to see and experience, the different countries and all that. And I took out the map and I looked at the map and became even happier because when I looked at the map, I realized it's downhill all the way to Nepal. It's going to be such a smooth and fun ride. So I asked Göran if I could join him on this expedition, the bicycle part, and was very surprised when he looked at me and he said, "But Renata, you have to realize, of course you can't join me. I mean, how would that look?" He said. "Can you imagine? People see this strong, big, tall, muscular mountain climber that has been training year after year after year and preparing for this expedition, this feat to bicycle all the way down to Nepal. I mean, sponsors have invested money. The public is reading about it in the newspapers. And like suddenly, a week before his departure, his girlfriend at home decides that she wants to tag along. On her own little bike. And the girlfriend is thinking, what a nice little outing. Bring the picnic basket. We're going to have so much fun. I mean, Göran wouldn't mind the company, not at all. But he knew, what would people think? Would it be such a big challenge if the girlfriend did tag along? Of course the challenge would be as big, but people would not see it as difficult if I actually did tag along. This was in '95. I hope that we've made it a bit further than that, right? Still, I was very much involved in this expedition. I became base camp manager, and in February '96, I flew down to the Kingdom of Nepal and the Himalayas for the first time in my life, and I fell in love again with those fantastic mountains. It's so beautiful, it's so powerful, and it's so majestic. And now we're going on a real expedition, so we had a pretty long trek ahead of us. But what you discover and see and experience during that trek is really some of the most fantastic nature you can imagine. And after a couple of weeks of hiking, you eventually end up in what's called the base camp, which is a small, like a miniature civilization, a miniature tent town built up in the middle of nowhere, far away from the rest of the world. And I spent almost 2 months here at the foot of the mountain, doing my day-to-day chores as base camp manager, helping out with the communication, fixing with some of the stuff, expedition equipment, generators, and whatever was needed, logistics, and so on, and had a fantastic time, even though we're in the middle of nowhere. And here you actually see Mount Everest. There you have the mountain, there amongst the clouds, this is the summit, and down there is base camp at around 5,200 meters. And as you understand and realize, I mean, this is a very primitive place. There's limited resources, so to say. I mean, everything that's here has been carried to base camp. There's no showers, there is no toilets. It's really primitive. But it didn't matter that it was this simple and primitive, because this is a magical place. People here have gathered to fulfill their dreams and to one day stand there on the summit of the highest mountain in the world, looking out from the roof of the world. And I was so inspired by all the climbers that I met during these weeks that I spent, almost 2 months that I spent in base camp. I wasn't climbing, so I met all of them back in base camp. And I had a picture of people who do this. I mean, that it's some kind of an elite squad. I mean, elite group of people with, big, strong, tall, muscular mountain climbers with, with beard and hair on their chest and everything. I mean, that's what you need to be able to do these kind of tough expeditions. And yeah, there were a few. I was even more inspired, of course, with the women climbers that I met during those weeks. Well, there were 2 of them, so it was definitely a minority. And I had first the picture that they would look the same, big, strong, tall, muscular, like those with beard and everything, like those former Hungarian Eastern country put-shotters or something. Yeah, I can joke about that. My parents are from the Czech Republic, so maybe there's a Eastern country gene, who knows. But when I met these climbers, when they came back from their summit attempts and from the mountain, and they had the ice axes, the sharp steel ice axes, and they put them aside, and they took off the crampons and the harness with the carabiners and the ropes and everything, all that cool stuff. And then they stood there with the long johns. They didn't look as cool and strong and muscular like I had imagined. They looked just like anybody else. And what's so common sense, what we all know, suddenly became so obvious. And I realized that it's not the strength in our leg muscles that will decide how far we can make it. It's not the strength in our biceps or triceps that will decide how high we can go, right? We have a much more important part of our body that decides that. And you all know which one that is, right? The mental strength, exactly. I still have men, mostly 60 plus, that approach me and go like this. Doesn't seem like there's too much there. And I'm like, yes, there is a bit there, but that's not what it's about. It's really up here. And that's more invisible, right? You can't see that from the outside. So I was so inspired by the people that I met, and I figured, what's the difference between them and me? And I couldn't come up with any other solution or answer or difference than that they had dared. They dared to have that dream. They dared to believe in themselves, but also, of course, were prepared to work hard to reach all the way to the top. And if they can do it, of course, I can do it too. If I'm willing to work hard enough and prepare hard enough, I can fulfill that dream too. And at least I have to try. We heard about that earlier today, the importance of failure and so on. Being a mountain climber, it's very common that you don't make the summit on your first attempt. You have to try and try and try again. For me, the ultimate failure is not trying. Of course, you have to give it a try. I might not make it the whole way, entire try, on every attempt, but at least I've tried. And every attempt I make is a journey where I learn something new that I can take with me on my second attempt and my third attempt and my fourth attempt. You really have to dare to try. So I decided, what do I have to lose? Of course I have to try once this idea was born. Then, on the other hand, of course, I had to train a lot too. I was still, in the beginning of my climbing career, and the years that follow were filled with training and preparation. And physical part, of course, is not completely unimportant. It's still a system that has to work. So if the body is in good shape, the mind will probably work even better as well. But it is really the mental part that is the most important thing. I mean, I've seen myself, and this is common sense. I mean, to succeed, you have to believe that you're going to succeed. I've seen myself standing there on the summit thousands of times, imagined how fantastic it's going to be once I get there, but also envision the uphill, knowing that it's going to be a tough and long climb. And then it's important also to put the finish line on the right spot. And a lot of people focus extremely much on the summit. And the summit is important. I mean, I want to have the view, but the summit is still halfway. And you don't want to forget that, especially not on a climbing expedition. Because if you've used all your resources, you have nothing left, no energy, nothing left, and you've come halfway, then you're in trouble. Or you celebrate too early, you pop up the champagne bottle on the summit. You just lose concentration, lose focus. And most people actually, they die on the way down because they relax. They think they've made it, or they're just too tired. And I'm not doing this because I want to shorten my life. I want to maximize it. So, I mean, I did a lot of reading and just figuring out what the other expeditions' mistakes had been, and trying to find out how I will not do the same mistakes, and learning from people who had been there before. And knowing that my finish line has to be back in base camp, that's when I really can relax and know that I've made it. And this took a few years for me to train and prepare mentally for this challenge. In '99, I felt prepared to go to Everest, to try and do this by myself. Well, yeah, you see me by myself on all the pictures, but I'm not doing it alone. If you see one person on the summit, there's a whole mountain of people trying to help and assist. Sponsors, climbing partners, filmers, photographers that document the expedition. It's really very much about team effort, and I like that too. My teams, though, this is the team in '99, or half of it. The rest was our fantastic Sherpas when we got down to Nepal. But this is the team flying in from Sweden, and yeah, I'm the only woman. That's how it's been on my expeditions. Well, I don't mind. I get to go and get all the guys for myself, so that's still pretty okay. Now, we were three of us that had the ambition to reach the summit. One of them was not going to go with us all the way, but he was going to go on a bit of the way anyway, and that was our photographer, Janne. He was going to document the expedition. And the reason why he wasn't going to go all the way is just that he had just started to climb. So a very brave man, a very good photographer, a very great filmer. And I had, of course, told him that you have to train, you have to prepare and everything. And he did. He lived here in Stockholm, close to Hammarbybacken. So he was running up and down and up and down and up and down Hammarbybacken. He was in really good shape. And every time he called me, he was so enthusiastic, saying, Renata, I'm the shape of my life. I'm going to fly up Everest. I'm like, yay! And I got enthusiastic too and everything. And then we get to Nepal and we get to base camp and we start climbing, and the first section is called the ice fall, and that's what you see now. It's a lot of crevasses and you have to go over ladders to get over the crevasses. And when Janne saw this, he became completely in shock. Normally he's supposed to walk across those ladders, but he just felt that was very scary. And I think this picture really shows what I was trying to say or prove or share in the beginning. Does it take strong leg muscles to cross this ladder? No, but you have to be mentally prepared for the challenges ahead. And Janne had missed this a bit, one could say. And I'm not standing here because I want to make fun of him. Absolutely not. On the contrary, I still want to, think he did a good job because he didn't give up. It's so common when we end up in situations that we're not prepared, that are new, that are scary, that are different, that we run, we escape, or we blame it on somebody else. He could have looked at me and he said, Renata, you didn't tell me this. I had no idea that this was going to be part of the assignment. He could have blamed everything on me and just left, but he didn't. He tried to find solutions, tried to, use his imaginations and be flexible and adapt and adjust and all that. And he did find a completely new way to get across that ladder. So that's good for him, although I don't know if it's much better, because what happens when you crawl? You look down, and that's exactly what you don't want to see. You don't want to look into this crevasse, this abyss that sometimes you don't know if they're 5, 50, or even 100, 150 meters. Yeah, some of the ambitions to go to Everest just disappeared. I could hear that, like, oh, that's fine. No problems. But on the contrary from Janne, I had trained for this. I had prepared for this. And you have to train and prepare. And again, this isn't very physical challenging at all. And this is information that is so easy to get. Reading all those books, looking at all those old documentaries, talking with people, I realized that this is how it looks. My office, my playground. This is what I have to learn. And I didn't wait until I get to Everest and it's sharp. I really have to train and prepare for this ahead of time. And it's not difficult. I got a ladder, started walking at it at home, dressed in my climbing equipment, and that was a bit nervous, just having it laying on the ground, because it was something new. And every time we do something new, we get the increase in our pulse and a bit blushy on our cheeks and, moist on our hands. And then you have to take those deep breaths and start taking those small steps. And eventually you calm down, you find the balance, find the confidence, and then you increase the level of difficulty and you go higher and higher and higher. And we were one of the fastest expeditions ever. Just after a few weeks, we were really high up on the mountain. And you see now is the south summit, 8,760 meters, and furthermost in the picture is the summit. And I started my summit bid the night between the 4th and 5th of May, and you start at night, and that's because you want to reach the summit in midday, which is common, logical. You don't want to get up at 7 in the morning, then you're on the summit on the evening, and then you kind of miss the whole view, and bad planning, have to go again. So you start at night, so you climb in the night, which is easier also. It's easier to climb up when it's dark than climbing down, so it's a safety aspect as well. You go up when it's dark, and then you climb down back to safety during daytime. So you want to stand on the summit at midday. And the only thing I had in my mind that entire night, I started at midnight, was to put one foot in front of the other. Saying to myself that every step I take, no matter how small that step is, it's still one step closer to the summit. That's what I kept saying to myself for 12 hours. I started at midnight and I reached the summit at midday. And I'm going to show you just a short video so you have a feeling of how it was the day, the 5th of May, when I actually reached the summit.
Hold on quickly as possible and then look for more quickly on the summit and then just everybody have the oxygen and make sure and masks and regulator working and everybody come back and safely and everybody.
Ta av dig glasögonen.
Ja, men jag har kämpat och tränat. Jag fixar det. Och jag har slitit ett år. Jag har tränat för det här. Och jag är så lycklig. Tack. Tack för att jag fick komma hit. Första försöket. Tack för att du har gjort det här.
This is a bit embarrassing.
Hela Sverige! Sverige ska vara stolt! Vilken tjej ni har!
Ja, fy fan vilket exempel där. Helt slut med.
Och nästan lättare utan syrgasmasken. Sista biten.
So that's how it looks on the summit. And now you know, now you don't have to go. Well, actually, with the new technology, you can go. Isn't that fantastic? And you don't have to even be cold or hungry or anything. You just, put on the glasses and you're there. So like, yeah, why did I do this? So I should have waited a few years, saved myself a lot of pain and money and everything. No, it's a fantastic feeling. And I mean, it is the uphills that make it work also. I mean, if it would have been an easy and flat road, then the feeling of reaching there would never be the same, right? I want the uphills because then the reward is so much bigger. And even if, the summit is still halfway, I have to return back to base camp also. And I do have video shots returning from base to base camp, but I'm not going to show you those because that are really, flip out completely. So it become really embarrassing. So we'll, and what do you do after this? I had that in my mind already before I headed out on these expeditions because I had heard about athletes and people who are involved in huge projects and then the project ends and they come home and they're all empty. I never felt empty. I've always felt so filled up with all the experience and inputs and things I've discovered and learned and people that I've met. And I've also felt so much energy when I've done something, the energy that I want to put into something new and continue. Finishing line in one way is the end of something, but on the other hand, it's the beginning of something completely new. And I thought a lot about that before I went to Everest. What am I going to do after that? And Everest was already a plan, in a much bigger plan. When I started climbing, I discovered a fantastic project called the 7 Summits. It's not my idea. It's done for the first time in '85. American named Richard Bass. But when I read about it, I discovered that this is what I want to do. It has, again, all those ingredients that I love. I get to continue to climb, but discover all different continents of the world. 7 Summits is climbing the highest peak on each continent. So Everest being one of them, of course. So this is what I decided to do. And I figured I might as well start with Everest because, if I do that, then the rest kind of will probably work out one way or another as well. So I went to Everest in '99, and then the year after I went to Kilimanjaro. And here you have the 7 Summits. It's Asia, South America, North America, Africa, Europe, Elbrus, Winson, Antarctic, and Karstens Pyramid is Oceania, the continent of Oceania, Australia included, and so on. And this is what I decided to do. What I didn't know at this point was that it would take me 15 years to complete this project. My fiancé, or Göran, he was killed in a climbing accident in 2002, so I put climbing completely on hold and did another expedition. But then 2 years ago, or a bit more, the spring of 2014, I was suddenly, was like one of those nice days, and was standing in my kitchen, and suddenly I kind of felt almost the voice from the mountains calling me. And I started thinking about this expedition that I had completely put on hold, and I decided that I'm going to try and complete this dream that had now become 15 years old. But of course, a lot had changed during those 15 years. I mean, I have 3 kids. It's like go out on an expedition just like that. How will that work? Am I in well enough shape? I hadn't climbed for 12 years. I had never been on an expedition of this magnitude without Göran. I was nervous, can I make it? How will I make it? There was a lot of questions, and I went back actually to Kilimanjaro, which I had done in 2000, in 2000. So I went back again just to kind of see if I was prepared both mentally and physically to undertake this challenge again. Because I decided that if I'm going to do this project, that I'm going to finish doing the 5 mountains that I had left, I'm going to do them in 6 months before the end of the year, because I had promised my kids to be home for Christmas. So I just had to make that work. So in 1999, I was on Everest, then I was on Kilimanjaro in 2000, and I'd done a lot of guiding on Kilimanjaro, so that's a mountain that I'm really secure with and familiar with. So I went back again, summited Kilimanjaro for the 8th or 9th time. I'm kind of lost track. And that was in June in 2014. In July, I went to Denali, highest mountain in North America, together with 2 American climbers. Again, I don't climb by myself. It's much more fun if you're a team, and also for the safety aspect, of course. And this is a serious mountain. I mean, it's high, it's cold, avalanches, crevasses. There's a lot of equipment that has to be carried up the mountain, food, stoves, gas, whatever you need, for almost maybe 1.5, 2 months, depending on the weather and snow conditions and so on. This season, summer of 2014, only 38% of the expeditions made it. People that had climbed together for many years didn't succeed. We succeeded. We were the last expedition on the summit after 8 days. So that was a fantastic feeling. This was in July. In October, I went to Russia to go to Elbrus. And yeah, I discovered that climbing had changed over those 15 years, because everybody I met took the cable car up the mountain. Because you can do that up to 3,200 meters approximately. And then, as if that wasn't enough, they jumped on the snowcats. And took the snowcat up to 5,000 meters, and then they walked the last part. And I just realized that I'm old school. That's not how you do it anymore. But I reached the summit after just 4 days, and I found a way to make these expeditions fast and very efficient, so that I would allow myself to be home in between, but not too long, because then you lose acclimatization. And I mean, during this, it's not so much the physical challenge that's the most important or difficult one. It's actually all the logistics and the communication and all the equipment around it, and making everything work as well. So there's many factors that has to work. Finally some real climbing, not just being passed by snowcats. This is Karsten's Pyramid, highest mountain in Oceania. Here you do something called a Tyrolean traverse. So yeah, I have to really trust my equipment, knowing that it's going to help me and save me when I need it. Reached the summit of Karsten's Pyramid in October, and then in November I went to Aconcagua, South America, managed to reach the summit as well there after just 2 weeks. And then the final mountain was on Antarctic, Mount Vinson, and that was a fantastic feeling. Just flying to the Antarctic and landing on the glacier was amazing in itself. And I was really happy when I finally reached my 7th summit. If we can have some sound, please. Will the sound work? Yeah? So let's go again.
Yes!
fixade! Helt otroligt! Och vilken dag! Tjoho! Thank you. So it took me 15 years. One shouldn't give up on your dreams. And there's another dream that I've had for even longer. I want to go to space. This is my next expedition. I've booked a ticket with Virgin Galactic. I have ticket number 192 and want to become the first Swedish woman in space. Yay! Now I'm training and preparing for this just like I would with any other expedition. And I want to, again, see things from a different perspective, from a new view. I'm training with the best. I'm really good at associating myself with and teaming up with world champions. Because if you do that, if you train and work with people that are better, then you too will excel and become so much better and stronger and faster or smarter, whatever it is. And I've been very fortunate to be able to fly with the Swedish Air Force. And this is just a glimpse of what I do when I'm at work. So yeah, I hope to see many of you helping me fulfill my dreams. So I'm glad that you're in the tech business, helping me develop those fantastic spacecrafts and everything, and airplanes and everything, so that I can go. One day I hope to go to the moon. I really would like to climb the highest mountain in the moon. And believe me, somebody will. It's just a question about when and who, and to be a part of that journey. Pushing those boundaries of what people believe is possible is fantastic. And if you aim for the moon, if you dare to look that far and aim for the moon, that's when you reach the stars. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Renata. Whole bunch of inspiration there. Thank you so much.